Okay, so I've used a lot of Apple products over the years. Some of them are essential, some just sit looking shiny, and then there are some that, well, let's just say at least they tried. But none of them have come close to what the 12-inch MacBook did. Because this thing wasn't just a miss, it was Apple trying to sprint into the future with tech that was barely ready to crawl. On the outside, it looked perfect. It was ultra thin, super portable, and had a Retina display. I mean, this thing looked like it came straight from the future. But the reality was much more different. The thing was vastly underpowered, had one of the worst keyboards, and only had a single port which you had to share between charging, data, and peripherals. It was a bold idea, but also one that flew too close to the sun. Today, we're taking a look at the 12-inch MacBook, what it was trying to be, why it failed, and whether it was deserving of the hate it received. So without further ado, let's jump in. Let's start with the design, because this is the part where Apple absolutely nailed it. At just over 900 grams or 2 pounds for my American audience, it was the lightest and thinnest MacBook Apple ever made. It was completely silent, had an amazing display, and rocked that super clean aesthetic Apple is known for. And it wasn't just about how it looked, it was also about how it felt too. Despite being tiny, the 12-inch MacBook had some of the best laptop speakers and trackpads at that time. It was pressure sensitive and was just as good as the ones found on the MacBook Pro. This MacBook would go on to influence the design of the Touch Bar MacBook Pro, albeit in a way that we'd soon come to regret. Apple wanted to show the world what their vision of the future of mobile computing looked like, and the 12-inch MacBook was their test subject. But to achieve such a thin design, Apple had to pretty much sacrifice everything else. And that brings us to performance. Inside the 12-inch MacBook was the Intel Core M processor, not Core i, Core M. These chips were built to be ultra-low power and completely fanless, which made them perfect for tablets and ultra-thin devices. But in a Mac running full Mac OS, that was a whole different story. Sure, it could handle basic tasks like typing documents, watching YouTube, and some light web browsing, but push it even a little by opening too many tabs or even running a Zoom call with other apps in the background would cause it to choke. And it wasn't just slow, it was also unreliable. And that's kind of the worst thing a laptop can be, especially when you're paying over $1,000 for a MacBook, because this thing was more expensive than the MacBook Air. It also didn't help that it was completely fanless, had a terrible webcam, and was prone to SSD failure. So even if you wanted to push it, the system was already working against you, thermally, performance-wise, and in long-term reliability. But okay, some people might not care about the fact that it runs macOS as well as a toaster. Maybe they just wanted something light for emails and Netflix. But even then, it was hard to justify, because using this MacBook for anything beyond basic tasks felt like trying to win a Formula 1 race on a bicycle. But what did matter to a lot of people was the keyboard, and oh boy did it suck. This was the first MacBook to feature Apple's now infamous butterfly keyboard. The 12-inch MacBook was the one that would poison the well for the Touch Bar MacBook Pro and cause a class action lawsuit for being comically unreliable. Sometimes the keys would double type and other times they wouldn't register at all, and if you had a stuck key, well, too bad. Apple's fix was to give you a whole new top case, essentially buying a new MacBook. This was basically the best marketing campaign Windows laptops could ever ask for, and it was coming directly straight from Apple. Because while Apple users were praying their spacebar wouldn't break mid-email, Windows laptops were getting better keyboards, more ports, and get this, actual cooling systems. And that brings us to another major problem: ports, or specifically the lack of ports. The 12-inch MacBook had one single USB-C port paired with an audio combo jack on the other side, which obviously made a lot of people mad. Because imagine buying a premium laptop and immediately needing to buy a hub just to do basic things like charging while transferring files or plugging in a mouse and a flash drive at the same time. And this was back in 2015 when USB-C wasn't just uncommon, it was a triple S rarity type port. Most people had never even seen a USB-C port, let alone owned a USB-C accessory. Oh, and I'm sure no one will miss MagSafe. You know, the magnetic connection that saved MacBooks from being yeeted across the room whenever you tripped on the charging cable. Replaced by a USB-C port that they shoved down our throats so many times yet only put on the iPhone only a year ago. So not only were you dealing with one port, but Apple actually removed one of their most useful features on their laptops. I mean, if you're asking me, I'd say that's a true courage moment right there. So at this point, you might be thinking to yourself, why did Apple even make the 12-inch MacBook in the first place? Well, in a weird way, the 12-inch MacBook wasn't just a product, it was more like a prototype that you could actually buy. A glimpse into the future that Apple wanted. It was a MacBook made for a world that didn't exist yet. But looking back, you couldn't say it didn't have an impact either. The design language of the 12-inch MacBook would go on to influence nearly every Mac that came after it. Some of its worst ideas stuck around too, like the butterfly keyboard, which haunted Apple's lineup for years. But to its credit, it was also weirdly ahead of its time. Today, Apple's M-series chips have made fanless Macs not just possible, but actually good. USB-C is finally mainstream, and Apple eventually brought back MagSafe and fixed the keyboard, even if it took them almost half a decade to do so. It's almost as if the 12-inch MacBook walked so that the M1 MacBook Air could run and not throttle itself to death. So how bad was it exactly? Well, in its time, pretty bad. Definitely the kind of laptop you'd regret buying, especially when the cheaper and more powerful MacBook Air was an option, not to mention the other countless Windows laptops out there. But in the bigger picture, it was one of the most important failures Apple ever made. Because without this weird little experiment, we might have never gotten the M1 MacBook Air. And sometimes, the best way forward is to trip really hard first. Anyway, let me know what you think about the 12-inch MacBook. Was it bad? Was it misunderstood? Or was it secretly a genius plan by Apple to make the M1 MacBook Air look better? Either way, let me know what you think in the comments below. And as always, thanks for watching, love you all, have a nice day.